Chapter 23, Reunited. The group traveled in tense silence on the way back to the tavern, riding in Cerberus's craft. Jacen sat with Darstad and made quiet small talk. Janae could not stop herself from looking at their exchanges and how they smiled at each other. A terrible feeling began in her breast as she watched the blocked warrior enemy named Darstad reach up and take Jacen's hand in his own. Euclidean watched the exchange from where he sat on the coach and finally made the connection. Jacen had found a new lover in his escape. Just then, Chino called out to Jacen, "So what happened to you after you fell into the river?" Jacen quickly explained how he and Darstad had initially fought each other, then found themselves being prepared to be eaten by cannibals. He described how they had worked together to escape, had separated, then met again at the prison. "We've been heading away from the prison since yesterday when we saw your craft coming towards us," Jacen explained. He looked at Janae many times during the ride, but she would not meet his eyes. The craft came out of the forest onto the path leading to the tavern when the sounds of many men fighting and screaming could be heard. Just as the afternoon sun was rising to the center of the sky, the group came to a stop overlooking a great battle in progress. They stared at 6 platoons of darkly armored attackers that encroached upon the tavern on foot. "A Legion commander!" exclaimed Darstad. He pointed at a prominently armored man who sat upon a large dire steed watching the events unfold in front of him. At the base of the tavern, a large melee battle was commencing between one of the platoons and several forest bandits. The bandits all wore similar armor to their own and stood guarding the tavern. Marvin was wearing the same kind of leather armor as they and swung a large baton at several attacking dark warriors, causing great trauma wherever his weapon struck. But he and the others that fought with him would soon be overrun by the enemy force that attacked them. "We've got to help them!" cried Janae, and she grabbed out her bow as she jumped off the craft and began running towards the fighting men. "Janae, wait!" cried Jacen, and Cerberus cursed as he shouted out a command to his raft horses, who began pulling the craft in the direction of the running woman. Janae reached a covered embankment and began drawing arrows from her quiver, which she shot at any of the black warriors who were unprotected. Her arrows found every target, and many of the dark warriors fell back from her attack. Cerberus brought his craft to a stop at the outskirts of the tavern furthest from the fighting. Unharnessing his raft horses, he trilled out several musical sounds, and the armored beasts ran off to pursue food in the nearby forest. The exhausted group gathered their weapons and jumped off the craft to help defend the tavern. Euclidean and Chino both jumped forward to engage the dark warriors closest to them, and their leaf-shaped blades soon cut into unprotected sections of the attacking warriors. Hope shot arrows from the protection of Cerberus's craft and stood guard over her wounded father, who lay covered in the wagon. Jacen ran over to Janae and picked up a fallen sword from the ground. He began to engage a black warrior who fought nearby, and was soon parrying the warrior's sword thrusts. Darstad stood back uncertainly, then saw another platoon of black warriors running forward to engage the new group. As the small group of fighters was almost overrun, Darstad leapt into the fighting and ran up next to Jacen. Picking up a short sword from a dying warrior, Darstad summoned his internal energies and channeled them through the weapon. A dark line of force erupted from the weapon and burst into the nearest black warriors. His energy caused several men to be pushed back with their armor scorched and bent. Suddenly, his energy became discordant within the weapon that was being used in a way it was not meant to. There was a great screeching sound, and the short sword began turning a bright orange color. Vapors of heat could be seen cascading away from the metal. Darstad screamed as the sword burned his hand, and he flung the burning weapon at a group of black warriors who stood uncertainly nearby. The weapon caught on fire as it arced through the air and finally exploded. The explosion sent pieces of jagged and burning shrapnel into the unsuspecting warriors, who screamed and tore at the folds of their armor where the burning pieces of metal had landed. Darstad fell to his knees and grabbed his burnt limb to his chest. All was chaos as the travelers and tavern protectors fought against the onrushing platoons of block warriors. Just then, a loud signal was heard, and the dark warriors fell back as their legion commander stepped down from his dire steed and drew out his focus weapon. Slowly, the single man walked towards the remaining defenders. The fighting came to a pause, and the fighters regathered themselves as the remaining dark warriors pulled back to let their commander through. Euclidean took a knee and heaved in exhaustion as the black warriors pulled back, and Benny ran forward carrying canteens of water, which he began to give out to the tired fighters. "We need to rally or run," said Darstad as he grit his teeth and wrapped his burned hand in a section of cloth torn from his clothing. "The Legion commander will summon his energies, and there is nothing known that can block him," he said to his new companions. Euclidean listened to the man, then stood up and cried out to Marvin, Jacen, and the other fighters near him, "Back to the tavern, and quickly!" Just then, another loud noise was heard by everyone. The Legion commander paused in his walk towards the group as the sound became louder and louder. The sound became a great roaring cry that caused everyone to look toward the direction of the noise. Suddenly, a glowing man with approximately 200 heavily muscled men appeared from the forest line. The glowing benefactor led a small army of men who wore no armor but carried many makeshift weapons. The arriving group of men were giving a great cry of rage at the sight of the blocked warriors. Carrying his staff before him, the glowing stranger gave a loud word of command, and he and the men with him started running towards the group of fighting blocked warriors, screaming a battle cry as they ran. At the last moment, the glowing stranger leapt 50 feet into the air and landed in an explosion of sound amid the dark warriors. As he landed, the Legion commander and many of the warriors around him were blasted several feet backwards, and a large indentation in the ground had been formed where the glowing man had landed. The Legion commander recovered and summoned his energy into his focus weapon, causing it to hum in an ominous way. The commander began to run at the glowing figure and pointed the focus weapon in his direction. The glowing benefactor waited as he watched the commander run at him, with his weapon outstretched, then subtly adjusted his stance and staff weapon. As the commander came within 5 feet of the stranger, he employed his focus weapon and set out a large pulse of dark energy at the glowing man standing in front of him. The dark energy pushed outward but was met with an unexpected reaction. As the energy rushed toward the glowing man, he brought up his staff and absorbed the strange energy into the weapon, then uttered a single arcane word, and another explosion of sound arced away from him, pushing into the Legion commander and causing him to lose his focus over his weapon. The Legion commander's energy was harmlessly dissipated by the staff weapon, and the Dark Leader was blasted backwards by the concussive effects of the glowing stranger's vocal power. His body went flying backward to land heavily on the ground, unmoving, and a charred and smoky opening was seen coming from the chest plate of his armor. All was chaos and fighting as the benefactor, the 200 men, the adventurers, and the tavern protectors attacked the dark warriors around them. After a brief time, the balance of the battle shifted, and the black warriors started getting cut down by the defenders. As the tide turned against them, many of the dark warriors began running back toward the forest, away from the glowing stranger, who mercilessly pummeled any enemy that came within reach of his deadly vibrating staff. Several Black Warrior veterans did not surrender and turned to face the protectors of the tavern and the fighting men. They were cut down in minutes by the glowing stranger and the other protectors. Soon the tavern field was cleared of any fighters. The last stragglers of Black Warriors were tearing off their armor and running into the forest on the far side of the main path. The glowing stranger watched the last few leave the area, then turned around to look at the group. "Master!" cried Jacen, and he ran up to embrace the man. The young fighter began weeping as he squeezed the glowing man to him. "I told you we would meet again," whispered Hecate as he embraced his weeping pupil to him. As Jacen embraced the man, Darstad watched from nearby, then looked down upon the ground. Bending over, he carefully picked up the vibronic focus weapon that had fallen from the dead Legion commander's hands and tucked it into his waist. The main group withdrew into the tavern, and Marvin was soon feeding everyone stew and ale. After a brief discussion with the benefactor, he began taking food out to the 200 men that were setting up camps outside around the perimeter of the tavern. As the tired group ate their portions, the glowing stranger saw to the wound in Aramis's side in a private alcove away from the main of the tavern. Soon he had withdrawn the wickedly sharp sword from within Aramis and had staunched the wound and was now packing it with wraps and unguent. Aramis was pale during these ministrations and shared a grief-filled look with his daughter, Hope, who sat by herself nearby with a line of tears running down her face. Hecate noticed the look and lay his hands upon Aramis and uttered a line of words in an unknown language. Aramis fell into a deep sleep, and the lines of grief momentarily left his sleeping face. Using specialized equipment that no one recognized, the master treated all minor wounds among the group, including Darstad's burned hand. "Master, what on earth?" began Jacen, but Hecate held up a hand and addressed the group before him. "I think it is time to tell you a story, and for everyone here to make some decisions for themselves," the glowing man said to the group within the tavern. The members of the band and several rough-looking types stopped talking and looked up as he spoke. For several hours, Hecate told the group his old story. He explained how his father was a man known as Jacob Magnus Riley, also known as the Dark Lord. He described how he, his father, and others had become imbued with a strange energy at the time of the fall, and how the old destruction had been caused by their actions. He explained that he had once been the Dark Lord's primary general for many years before leaving his service. As he finished his tale to those around him, many stood open-mouthed in wonder at this strange story. Now the time has come to end his rule. I have sworn to fight him. With my help and the help of all who we can recruit, we will strike against the blocked warriors and destroy them along with any others that serve the Dark Lord. Those that do not wish to fight should make their decision and leave us," he finished. "What of the men outside?" asked a swarthy forest dweller that had fought against the block warriors alongside Marvin. "I liberated them from a prison from the deep forest to the south. There are other such prisons within the forest, and I plan to liberate them all to bolster our forces against the Dark Lord's army." Many within the room began talking at once, and several of the forest dwellers present quietly left the tavern. Noting those that left, Hecate drew Jacen over to his side to speak with him privately. "There is more to the story, but for your ears only," he told his old pupil. While the men around them all spoke to each other about what the future would hold, Master Hecate explained how his father had ordered him to kill Jacen when he was but an infant. Instead, Hecate explained how he had arranged to hide the young baby and had later decided to train Jacen to be a fighter. He further explained that Jacen was his much younger half-brother, as the Dark Lord was father to them both. It was part of an old ritual that the man would seek his own way upon his 18th year, and as such, I arranged for us to part ways those years ago. I've kept watch over you from time to time, but never revealed myself to allow you the chance to make your own way," the old master explained. Jacen and Hecate spoke long into the night, with Jacen describing many things he had learned in their absence from one another. Hecate spoke of the time he had kidnapped the infant Jacen so many years before, and had sent him through the panels of time with old technology that no longer existed, as well as many things that concerned Jacen's lineage. "Master, there is something else you should know of. 2 years ago, I was able to summon a demonic familiar into our realm using magics. Her name was Vel, and we lived together for 2 years before she became lost to me when I pursued your armor piece from the priest of Ulm," Jacen explained. The young fighter held up his left forearm where Hecate's armor piece rested. The inscribed runes that were etched into the armor piece glinted in the candlelight of the tavern. "The priests of Ulm! I cannot believe they still exist. I haven't spoken to them for some years now," Hecate intoned as he examined the old forearm guard. Of the demonic familiar, he said nothing more. Janae watched the many groups talking around her in excitement about the upcoming battle against the Dark Lord's forces. Benny slept on a bench next to her and was snoring loudly. With her heart breaking, she watched Jacen speak to his old master, who was also the glowing stranger. She glanced over and noticed Darstad sitting alone with no one speaking to him. The former Legion commander stood up and came over to her. "You are Janae?" he asked. She nodded and he continued. "Jacen has told me much of you and how he felt towards you before becoming separated from your group," the man said. Janae's heart quivered at the recent memory of her adventures with Jacen and how they had shared a passionate kiss together on the barge when the man spoke again. "I am sorry that our travels together have taken him from you and that our paths are interwoven together moving forward," he said to her. Janae did not respond, and the lithe former Legion commander spoke again. "I have decided to stay by his side and fight the Dark Lord. What have you decided?" asked the swarthy man. Janae considered his words, then stood up and looked at him in his eyes for a moment before moving away towards the stairs that led to the rooms above. Darstad watched her go, and with a moment of empathy, realized that she too had fallen in love with Jacen. Janae closed the door to the room, and the sounds from the tavern below echoed mutely into her momentary abode. Just then a small knock came on her door. Janae opened the door to see Cerberus standing there. He carried a jug of ale and 2 mugs and stood leaning on the doorframe. "Thought you could use some company," he said. Janae was about to close the door in his face when she remembered the pain of losing Jacen. With a quivering hand, Janae took the jug and mugs from Cerberus, pulled him into the room, and closed the door.